The Black Lake That Consumes Fear, a Dark True Story. The Black Lake was hidden among ancient trees, its still surface reflecting a darkness that seemed to have a consciousness of its own. The mist hung low, dense, enveloping every trunk and stone, making the path uncertain. The first approach was almost irresistible. The air felt heavy, laden with something invisible that pressed against the chest and quickened the breath. Each step on the damp ground produced an echo that disappeared before it could be recognized. Locals told stories of visitors who never returned, or who came back changed with empty eyes, carrying memories of horrors that no human being should witness. Curious onlookers and investigators arrived confidently, flashlights and cameras in hand, believing they could capture the extraordinary. But they soon realized that the water wasn't just dark, it was alive, observant, conscious. Small ripples appeared without wind, shadows shifted on the banks, footprints appeared and disappeared as if the lake had a will of its own. The icy air seemed to pierce the skin, each breath a conscious effort, each movement a challenge. Cameras froze, recorders captured impossible whispers, and reflections in the water told their own stories, anticipating thoughts and fears that no one had shared. One visitor reported feeling his reflection grinning cruelly, mocking his most intimate mistakes, while another felt repressed memories emerge, accompanied by a burning sense of guilt and dread. With each passing minute, the lake's presence became more tangible, more oppressive, as if the environment itself were conscious and evaluating every human being who dared to approach. The silence was absolute, crushing, amplifying every sound, every heartbeat, transforming fear into something almost physical. The lake was not merely water, it was a prison for the mind, a mirror reflecting the worst in everyone, shaping reality according to their inner terrors. The fog thickened, making it impossible to distinguish what was solid, what was reflection, and what was pure illusion. Every step near the water was measured, every gesture observed and distorted. Even the most skeptical began to feel the change. Disjointed thoughts, distorted images, and the certainty that something invisible was watching them, studying, waiting, and yet, no one retreated. The fascination with the unknown, with what could not be explained, was stronger than fear. Those who gazed longingly at the surface realized that they were not merely being observed, they were being touched by the lake, and that each reflection could become real, each shadow a concrete threat ready to emerge from the darkness. Twilight was approaching, and the lake seemed to absorb the little light that remained, making the surface even more opaque, impossible to penetrate with the eye. Each shadow on the shores seemed to breathe, as if it had a life of its own, and the dense air carried an indefinable metallic odor that slowly penetrated the lungs, making each breath a painful effort. The investigators began to notice small anomalies, reflexes that moved independently, distorting gestures, contorting expressions, anticipating fears that had not yet arisen. One of them, while trying to film, realized that the camera was recording something different from what his eyes were seeing. The water showed impossible figures, human outlines that appeared and disappeared, always with a cruel smile, always watching. Each attempt to move away seemed futile. Their steps on the damp ground were slow, heavy, as if the earth itself and the mist conspired to keep them close to the lake. Voices whispered through the silence, meaningless words, but which penetrated the mind, awakening memories of old traumas, failures that each one thought forgotten. The tension became almost physical. The air seemed to weigh on their shoulders, compressing bones and muscles, making every gesture a conscious, meticulous, almost ritualistic act. The visitors' reflexes began to act autonomously. A look of doubt became mockery. A hesitation turned into a threat. It was impossible to distinguish whether the danger came from the water, from the mind, or from both. Fear was no longer just a sensation. It was a concrete presence, shaping perception, flowing down the lake's shores and touching every thought. Through the mist, figures that no one would dare call human emerged in the reflections, repeating movements, recreating past flaws and mistakes with disturbing precision. Each investigator felt their own past invading the present, Their worst moments reflected intensified as if the lake were hungry for memory and guilt. The cold intensified, penetrating to the bone, while each shadow seemed to draw closer, whispering promises of despair and pain. Still, no one moved. The fascination with the mystery, the need to understand the seemingly conscious presence, was stronger than the instinct for survival. But deep down, everyone knew that the lake didn't just observe, it imprisoned, absorbed, transformed fear into tangible reality. And on the black, motionless surface, the darkness seemed to wait patiently for those who dared to look further than they should, promising that each reflection, each shadow, would carry with it something that would never be forgotten. Night had fallen completely, and the lake seemed to swallow everything around it. The thick fog now obscured the view just a few meters away, making it impossible to distinguish trees from shadows. Each breath carried the damp cold that penetrated the bones, and each step was accompanied by echoes that belonged to no one, reverberating in the minds of the visitors like silent warnings. Small ripples appeared on the black surface, and each reflection seemed to have a life of its own, moving out of sync with reality, anticipating fears and thoughts. An investigator stepped back, but his reflection remained motionless, staring at him with eyes that were not his own. The feeling of being analyzed, judged, and manipulated became overwhelming. Movements that were once automatic now required conscious effort, as if the water itself weighed on his muscles and joints. Whispers arose from nowhere, disjointed words that penetrated directly into the mind, awakening memories that everyone believed they had forgotten, each one more painful and humiliating than the last. If this interpretation is making you rethink this story, leave a comment below with your perspective. These videos are meant to provoke reflection, and I read all the comments. And if this type of content interests you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones. The cameras froze. The recorders picked up impossible noises, and every attempt to record what was happening failed. Reflections began to break free, recreating the investigators' actions, gestures, and expressions, but in a distorted and threatening way. Each reflected movement was a mockery, each hesitation, a sentence. Fear was no longer just a sensation. It was a tangible presence, shaping the surrounding reality, making each shadow come alive, each reflection capable of becoming concrete action. Collective tension grew. Small lapses in attention were immediately punished by the lake's manifestation. A sigh carried memories of losses, mistakes, and traumas, and each investigator realized that the darkness was not merely the absence of light, but a conscious entity, absorbing thoughts and emotions, transforming them into forms that approached, touched, and corroded sanity. And yet, driven by curiosity or desperation, they continued to draw closer. They knew that looking too closely meant confronting concrete personal horrors, but the compulsion was irresistible. Each reflection, each shadow, each ripple carried the promise of revealing something no one could bear, but that everyone felt they needed to witness. The lake was alive, intelligent, patient, and its hunger for fear only grew with each second of attention it received. The absolute silence of the lake was now crushing. No insects, no wind, no life beyond the mist and the black water. Each breath sounded like a thunderclap in the ears. Each step seemed to be watched, measured, anticipated. Reflexes not only imitated but transformed gestures and expressions into physical threats, repeating past mistakes and exaggerating failures, as if the lake fed on humiliation and despair. An investigator realized that his hands, when moving, had a response of their own in the water, trembling and contorting in impossible ways, mocking every hesitation. The feeling of being hunted by something invisible grew. Small movements of the water formed images of old losses, repressed memories, and forgotten betrayals. Each visitor felt their own weaknesses materialize before their eyes. Trying to look away was useless. Reflections appeared at impossible angles, showing up where they shouldn't, accompanying every thought, every breath. The collective fear grew, making each person vulnerable not only to the lake, but to the manifestations of the group itself, intensified by the shared panic. The air seemed to compress, making breathing a conscious, painful effort, each second an eternity. The lake reacted to thoughts, anticipated reactions, explored the deepest fears of each individual. The perception of reality began to fragment. Boundaries between reflection and concrete action dissolved. Simple gestures were distorted. Mental echoes created non-existent movements, and each person felt that their own body no longer belonged solely to them. Inaudible whispers became almost screams in the mind, laden with painful memories, and shadows from the shore seemed to pierce the mist to touch, accuse, and frighten. Attempts to retreat were thwarted. The lake seemed to expand its influence, transforming the shore into a prison, each step a burden. Even the most skeptical recognized that this was not mere water. It was presence, intelligence, judgment. It was fear itself materialized, shaping reality, testing the limits of sanity, absorbing every failure, every regret, every sigh of terror. The group felt a growing urgency. Something was about to fully emerge from the water. Reflections were no longer just images. Gestures and expressions gained autonomy, piercing the surface, threatening to become reality. Each individual understood without words that the lake would not forgive. The night became almost eternal, and the only certainty was that terror was about to reach its most concrete, intimate, and inevitable form. When the first light of dawn tried to pierce the mist, the lake remained unchanged, black, silent, indifferent. But the survivors realized that something had changed forever. Reflections were not just images. They were fragments of their own sanity, vivid memories that seeped into their minds, recalling every failure, every fear, every secret. The terror of the lake had not ended with the night. It had become a part of them, etched into their memories like a scar that would never fade. The surviving investigators slowly walked away, their eyes empty, carrying stories no one would believe. Inner voices whispered in every thought, memories of figures and gestures that continued to move on the periphery of their vision. The lake, silent and impassive, remained there, eternal, waiting for the next bold or reckless souls who dared to face its surface. Each step, each glance, each breath fueled its power, and the darkness of the water remained alive, hungry, reflecting humanity's deepest fears. The air lingered, heavy with memories and silence, making it impossible to distinguish reality from delirium. Each shadow seemed to carry the presence of the lake. Each ripple on the black surface suggested movements that no one could confirm. The surrounding space was frozen in tension, as if nature itself had been shaped by the collective fear of those who dared to approach. No natural sounds were audible. Life seemed to have been sucked away, leaving only emptiness and the awareness of the danger that lurked there. Stories of missing or returned visitors changed, once considered legends, now took on absolute weight. The lake not only reflected fear, it cultivated it, amplified it, transforming every human impulse into tangible energy, reinforcing its own presence. Each new visitor would be judged, absorbed, and molded by the lake in the same way, perpetuating the cycle of silent, inescapable, and continuous horror. And so the Black Lake remained, still, silent, eternal, a mirror of nightmares that no one could fully comprehend, ready to transform curiosity into terror, fear into reality. What is seen can never be ignored. What is felt remains engraved, and those who dare to return will never be the same. Every reflection, every shadow, every breath lost in the mist confirms that the lake remains alive, waiting patiently, hungry, for the next gaze, the next vulnerable heart. The darkness is eternal, and fear never sleeps. If you enjoyed this approach and want to continue exploring stories that are almost never told this way, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And now, click on the video that's appearing on the screen. It directly complements what you just watched and may completely change the way you see this story.